Hey everybody, welcome to A Game for Your Thoughts. Today we're talking about Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. After finishing Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, I instantly wanted to start this game back up and start it all over again. This was an amazing experience that I loved from start to finish. The journey this game takes you on is really amazing, and it is a great experience for Dragon Ball fans and even newcomers alike. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot is a retelling of the Dragon Ball Z story from the manga and anime that they've redone for a video game setting, and it works really well here. I love this story, and they did a great job of adapting it. The story of Dragon Ball Z is a very long adventure, but it is a very heartfelt and action-packed adventure. I love the development in the story of Dragon Ball Z. I could go on about it for hours. I won't, but I totally could because it is a really well done experience that I love all the way through. There are so many moments and characters in this story that are so iconic that I love personally, and it was so great to see these redone for a video game format. And they did a really great job of bringing all my favorite moments. While they did skip out on some, it was totally understandable because they couldn't keep everything or else this game would be really long. This game just does such a great job of telling this story that absolutely old fans of the series are going to love seeing their favorite moments and their favorite characters. And even new fans are going to find a great way to kind of latch into the story. It does a great job of keeping the most important parts there and kind of booting out some more of the filler stuff that's not totally necessary. That makes this story really great for new and old fans. You'll even run into characters that were in the original Dragon Ball, and it does a great job of kind of being like, oh, hey, here's this character. Most of this information is tucked away in the Z encyclopedia that you gotta kind of find, but it's really great information for people who have no clue who Ader is, or even Nam. Characters like that who are important in Goku's story, but aren't terribly important in the Dragon Ball Z universe, that shows up in this game. This is a really long game. I spent about 35 hours in this game, and I still didn't even complete it, but there was still lots to do. This game was really enjoyable. I've also heard talks of having like the original Dragon Ball series put into this game as DLC, or they should make it like a separate game. If they were to combine this all into like one super game, it would be a really long experience. It would be really cool to see Goku's journey from start to finish. In the future, I would actually really like to see that, or maybe even an adaptation of Super. Something along those lines would be really cool because I really liked what this game did with the Dragon Ball universe. My first and probably biggest complaint about this game comes in the side quests. There are a lot of side quests peppered out through the story. Like I said, it's a long game, and there's got a lot of space to fill in between story elements, so they throw in these side quests. But the biggest bummer is most of these side quests were pretty lame. A lot of them were really super fetch questy, and I wonder how many times I was gonna have to save the kooky cook from getting attacked, and it was like the ninth time, and I was just like, lady, I don't care anymore. There was a lot of really fetchy side quests, and a lot of them really kind of follow that same formula where not a whole lot of them were really that important. I can think of one off the top of my head that was like essential to be vital to the story or adds a little bit more that wasn't there before that I really appreciated. I liked what they did with that side quest, but that was the only one. At first, I was really excited to do all the side quests, but very quickly my excitement teetered out, and I kind of found myself really forcing to do my side quests by the end of the game. My recommendation, do all the side quests up until about the Frieza saga. Then at that point, I'd say you could probably put them aside or not even bother at all because they weren't all that interesting and it didn't really ever feel like it made that big of a difference. So my recommendation, just kind of ignore them and you'll probably be just fine. One idea that would be really awesome to implement into these side quests is to have like side stories or things cut out of the game or more of like kind of like the filler episodes. For example, the Garlic Jr. saga. If you were to have that as like a cool longer side quest, I'd totally be down for that. It's not something you have to do, but it'd be a cool addition for big fans like me who know all these filler things. Or even have a quest where you have to go find a pearl for Krillin's girlfriend Marin. Things like that are just cool side filler things that aren't like fan favorites, but would be a great way to kind of fill some space in between the main story, like kind of how it did in the anime. But just the side quests that we got weren't very interesting, and I found myself skipping a lot of them just because of how uninteresting and unrewarding they were. Story-wise, the main story is what carries this game for the most part. It was really interesting and awesome. I love the Dragon Ball Z story, and so seeing it redone was really great. They even took out some of my least favorite parts, which was fine, but they kept all the main important parts there. That gives you the main idea of the story. Newcomers are absolutely going to be able to get into it, get all the main stuff, and even join in some hardcore Dragon Ball conversations because they just get the main point across without spending too much time on stuff that really doesn't matter. And I really appreciated that, as like I said, it really tailors it towards new fans and old. So for the gameplay department, there is a lot going on. Yes, you have heard true, you have seen it. This is an RPG game. Is it a totally hardcore RPG game? Not at all. Yes, you do have characters to level up. Yes, you have skill trees to do, and yes, you have stats and you get XP. Basic RPG things. But in the end, these things really don't matter a whole lot. But I'm going to explain it a little bit more once I talk about the combat. The combat of Dragon Ball Z Kakarot is actually pretty rad. I really love the combat, and these ended up being my favorite sections. At first, it was quite daunting. It was a little confusing and a little weird, but once I got the hang of it, it was really awesome. It felt really fluid, and I felt in control of the character. I never was like, oh man, I didn't do that. What are you doing? It really felt in control, and I really felt like I had a grip on the combat, and it was really easy to learn and really difficult to master for sure. Well, at times it can feel kind of button mashy, but I found the ones that I was button mashing and just mashing the attack button were the ones that I ended up losing the most or taking the most damage. I just feel like button mashing really didn't make it that much better of an experience anyways, and so I found myself trying not to button mash. Because I found when I was doing the best of moving around the map and using my special attacks and watching the opponent and seeing what attacks they were doing and kind of changing my tactics based around them, or even waiting for the prime opportunity to attack, those were the fights that were the most engaging, the most fun, and that I had the most success with. Once I got to that point, it made these fights a lot more engaging and a lot more interesting. It was no longer just matching the attack button and moving whenever I could and blocking at the right times. It became a little bit more slower and methodical, and I was able to watch the opponents more and plan my attacks based around their attacks, but I still felt in control of the fight. It was a really great system that actually felt really rewarding when I had a really solid fight that I did really efficient and that the enemy didn't really do a whole lot to me damage-wise. It just felt really, really rewarding and really efficient. This was all really cool because in the meantime I had to keep an eye on my key meter to make sure that I was having enough ki to use my special attacks. And even once you get to the point when you unlock Super Saiyan mode, your ki meter slowly drains. But it does actually a pretty good job of making sure it's not too unfair. You're not overpowered when you're in the Super Saiyan mode, but also at the same time it kind of buffers you a little bit so you can't just go Super Saiyan and then just go super crazy with it and feel overpowered. It does a great job of kind of keeping it a good balance of making you feel like, oh, I'm doing a lot more damage than I was, but also at the same time you gotta watch your ki meter as that slowly goes away as you're fighting as a Super Saiyan, so you got to make sure you keep an eye on that. There's a lot of factors going on once they introduce transformations and stuff like that, but they did a great job of implementing it, that it never felt overpowering, but then it also didn't feel like it was kind of cheap or used poorly. I feel like I was able to manage my ki efficiently and keep Super Saiyan going. It was a really awesome way to implement the Super Saiyan transformations. So that's the basics of combats. Now how do those RPG elements implement into there? So like I said, you're leveling up your character, you're gaining XP, and you have all these stats that can help push the battles in your favor or not. And for the most part, I feel like they did it in kind of a smart way because it wasn't a hardcore RPG. There was a lot going on at first and it was really intimidating, but I found that a lot of it was kind of just tucked under the side and that a lot of the RPG elements actually kind of moved into the character development. What do I mean by that? In Dragon Ball, these characters throughout the series, they're improving, they're growing, they're finding the way to improve their power and be the best fighter that they can be. For example, Vegeta, he's always just trying to get ahead of Goku the whole story, and it's really interesting. But one thing I really liked is I feel like the characters' levels wasn't so much more of a measurement of the player as like a gameplay of like, oh, I'm level 63, I can take on that level 62 with no problem. It wasn't so much of that. It was more to show a progression of the character. You start out at like level 5, and then by the game you're like level 70, and it can definitely see there's a progression of the characters, and I also feel like this implements more into the story. I look at fights in the story that I really enjoyed, for example, Kui and Vegeta. Vegeta tears Kui a new one, and it's brutal. And the way that the levels kind of implement, you show up to this fight, Vegeta's like level 20 something and Kui's like level 17. You're like, Kui clearly doesn't stand a chance because his level is far lower than mine, and then that fight's just super easy. Then like the next fight is with Zarbon, and Zarbon clearly is better than Vegeta, and so you can see that in his level. Zarbon is a couple level higher than Vegeta, and Vegeta ends up losing that fight in the story. So it's really interesting because I felt like it kind of, the level wasn't so much of like a gameplay of like, okay, you're level this. That's kind of just like your standard. It's kind of more of the characters thing. It kind of portrayed the way that they feel in the show, growing power, and even the way that they match up with other characters. So with that being said, you're probably thinking, well, why in the world is an RPG anyways? That doesn't make any sense if it just kind of doesn't really matter. And if it does, it doesn't make that big of a difference. Then what's the point? That's a good point to make. I feel like that is very true. Then what is the point? But I like look at the game and things like that, and I don't really see how they would be able to do it without these RPG elements. Punching the guys and having numbers and critical hits make these fights like look a little bit more flashy, and I feel like I'm actually doing damage because I can see like how much health they have and how much damage I'm doing and what's the most efficient ways to do damage. Things like that was really nice to have. In the long run, really, the RPG elements are not the best. This is not the best RPG experience. But for what the game does, and like I said, it kind of just makes it feel like you're the character progressing. It's not so much as the player progressing as an RPG character. It's more of Vegeta growing as a better warrior. Things like that I feel like actually kind of made it a little bit deeper than it really was. With that being said, that also kind of applies to the skill trees. I actually really enjoyed going through the skill trees and unlocking new skills. Like I said, it kind of felt like a sense of progression of the character. At start, Vegeta can do like his Gallic Gun, and Goku can like only do his Kamehameha, and things like that are kind of just their basic moves. But as the story progresses, Vegeta learns how to do the Big Bang and the Final Flash, and you use your skill tree to go through and learn these new moves. And it's really awesome, and I just really enjoyed the skill tree. It was really cool because then it made collecting the Z orbs out in the open world really entertaining because actually collecting the Z orbs was like one of my favorite parts of this game. It was really cool that I really enjoyed collecting the Z orbs more than I did doing most of the other side activities. And using these Z orbs to upgrade my characters, or even going into like these little training grounds to learn like new special moves that are hardcore special moves compared to the other ones, it was really awesome. And I just definitely felt like a sense of progression of the character, and it was a good way to implement these skill trees. I definitely felt like each one made a big difference of the character itself. So like I said, I going around and collecting these Z orbs to use my skill tree, and there's other activities going on too besides that when you're in the open worlds and not in story moments or fights. And these activities are actually pretty lame. There's things like fishing and time trials and resource collecting, and I think you can play like baseball, and all in all, they were kind of just whatever. It wasn't anything too exciting, nothing that really enticed me to do it. In the end, none of them felt rewarding. That was kind of the tricky thing about a lot of what was going on, is the only rewarding parts were the fights and the story moments. Everything else was kind of just secondary. Even if they would have cut everything else out and made this kind of a pretty straightforward story of where it's just like from one story moment to the fight and the story moment to a fight and kind of cutting out everything in between, this would actually not be too bad. It would cut out a lot of the things that I didn't really care for. I do appreciate that they're here for people who are like super into it or kind of want to take a break from the story or wanting to explore, things like that. These are certainly here for people like that. But for me, it just was kind of uninteresting and kind of a waste of my time, and I tended to avoid them. And that was fine. I didn't have a problem avoiding them. I wasn't like, oh man, I really wish I was super into this fishing. It didn't really catch me, and that was fine. It didn't ruin the experience at all. This was also somewhat of a bummer because, like I said, you're collecting all these resources, and you can use these resources to have Chi-Chi make you food that can help boost your stats. I never felt like any of these stats were like that important. Like I said, it was kind of more just a sense of progression of the character. Some fights, I absolutely used those meals and food to increase my stats, and it did seem to help. So if you're struggling with the fight, it's a great way to do it, but I don't feel like I ever struggle with much of the fights. Most of the struggles came from my gameplay tactics that I used going into the fights. I wasn't analyzing the fight as well as I could or using the right skill moves when I needed to, things like that. So in the end, the food and the cooking and the resources and all these extra activities, they kind of just weren't all that important. I appreciate them being there. They certainly tried, but for me, it just didn't stick, and it didn't ruin the experience, but it's just something definitely pointing out. So let's dive into the graphics and the technical issues. Well, graphics are good. Technical issues, there's a few. First off, let's start with the technical issues. The main ones, mostly that I saw, were the UI issues. There would be some times when things that I would want on the screen, for example, like an enemy's health meter, were just kind of gone. They would eventually fix themselves in a moment, or if like I died and had to like reload the fight, they would kind of appear. Or like if there was like a skip cutscene button, it would kind of just all of a sudden stay for like the next like several cutscenes or even into the gameplay. Things like that were a little weird. They would tend to fix themselves, which was fine. It just was kind of a little weird and a little unpolished. But I hate doing this. I hate complaining about loading screens, but this game had a lot of loading screens and they were really long. I don't usually mind loading screens. I mean, I play Fallout 4 a lot, and that game has so many loading screens and they're really long. But I feel like the loading screens are kind of spread out in Fallout 4 to the point that I don't really notice them. But in Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, they were pretty consistent. For example, I had a side quest where it was like, I talked to Piccolo, loading screen. I had to walk across the room, talk to Krillin, loading screen. A few lines of dialogue, loading screen. And then Krillin's like, go to the Capsule Corporation. So I was like, okay. So I had to go on the map. And I teleported to the Capsule Corporation, loading screen. I walked into the building, loading screen. I talked to Bulma, loading screen. It was just so many loading screens. And like I said, they were pretty lengthy too, that it just got kind of tedious. It really killed the pace of a lot of these quests. And it wasn't just the side quests. I found mostly the side quests this happened, but the main quests also had a lot of this loading screen too. And at first, it didn't really bother me. I was trying to keep kind of like a positive, like, okay, it's fine. This game's got to load a lot of stuff. But when it was like, when I had to like walk across the room, loading screen, talk to somebody, loading screen, things like that were just really annoying. I hate complaining about loading screens, but this one was definitely a problem that didn't ruin the experience, but was definitely something worth noting. Graphically, this game looks really, really awesome. Exploring the world, the cutscenes, and the story moments look really, really good. I really enjoyed looking at this. It really looks like the anime, and it looks really appealing to the eyes, and Akira Toriyama's just flashy and cartoony style is definitely very apparent, and it's very charming. Then, there were moments like this. Pretty cool, huh? Then there was moments like this.
You and this whole planet are done for! How about this? This has to be enough power to destroy the Earth and the whole solar system!
Pretty cool, huh? Things like that were really, really impressive that I really enjoyed seeing. But these moments were very few and far in between, as they only fell upon moments of the story that were really big, or there was a lot of things going on that were really impressive. You know, the game does a really great job when it makes me go wow out loud, and this game has a lot of those wow moments, and it was really impressive. Like some of those moments I just showed you ago, they're really, really impressive, and they look really, really good. But unfortunately, this game doesn't have that the entire way through. I understand, probably because of budget restraints or things like that. They certainly couldn't do that wow look the entire time. This game would have looked amazing. I wouldn't have complained at all about any of the graphics at all if this game looked like that the entire time through, because those moments were incredible and they looked really amazing. It was kind of odd though, as there was kind of like three tiers of cutscenes. There was like a very basic cutscene where character models were kind of just standing there and talking. There wasn't any movement very much, if at all. Like their mouths were like kind of the only things moving. And when something big would happen, like Vegeta throwing a Dragon Ball into the water, it would just cut out and the narrator would be like, Vegeta threw the Dragon Balls in the water. And it's like, you couldn't animate Vegeta throwing the Dragon Ball in the water. It was kind of lazy, and it was a good place to put a lot of story, and that's usually what happened, is when there was a lot of story going on, these moments would appear. But it just wasn't very appealing to the eyes, and it just kind of got dull after a bit because the characters were kind of just standing there talking. The nice thing was is you could kind of skip the dialogue at your own pace, so you can kind of speed pass through these moments. But these moments showed none of the polish that you see in those wow moments. Like I said, if this game was all of that like wow look, this game would have been amazing. But these moments were just definitely like, wow, this isn't as polished as all this other stuff. It was really, really weird, and it just didn't seem in very good place. The next like kind of tier is like this like middle ground where it was like kind of like these wow moments, but it wasn't like super flashy and the lighting was a little weird. It just was kind of like a good middle spot. And these moments were usually reserved for shorter cutscenes that there really wasn't a whole lot going on, but there was some intense fight going on, something like that that wasn't super flashy. And these were fine. They just were kind of inconsistent. It was really inconsistent overall. But then we have those wow moments, and I love those wow moments. They look so amazing. I mean, I already showed you a few of them, and so it looks really cool, and I really appreciate the style. Yet again, I kind of wish it was this whole game. I understand budget. They probably just didn't have the budget to do it. I doubt they were like, we don't want to do the whole game like that. This game absolutely has a lot of heart and passion into it, and I don't feel like their lack of heart and passion was the reason why this game doesn't look like that all the way through. Those games, or those moments, probably cost a whole lot of money to make, and they're really expensive. So I understand it, but it was kind of a bummer, as it just made the whole experience graphically kind of inconsistent. Graphically, one part that never disappointed was the actual fighting itself. Those moments were always really cool, flashy, and just really appealing to the eyes. I really enjoyed the fighting sequences when I was in control, as it just was always fun to watch, and it was really interesting seeing the characters kind of just flash all across the arena, and the punches and the energy blasts, things like that were really appealing to the eyes, and those parts looked really, really awesome. In the end, this story is what carries this game. There is a lot of really awesome things and moments in this story, and that make this game so iconic. But this came from the Dragon Ball manga and story and TV show, so the game itself shouldn't get credit for that, but I really appreciate what they did with it because it made it different than the anime and the manga. It made it worth going and buying this instead of just watching it. It made this experience great for new and old fans alike because of how they implemented the story into a video game setting. This game is certainly very flawed. I loved the combat system, but a lot of the other things beyond the story and the combat was really kind of dull, and the visuals were really inconsistent. When they looked good, they looked really good, and it was really appealing and really awesome to watch. But beyond that, it was just kind of dull. But it's kind of weird because in the end, I loved this game. It was a really great experience that I would highly recommend to Dragon Ball fans and even people who don't know a whole lot about Dragon Ball. This is a great place to start. I would say probably just ignore all that other stuff. Don't play the side quests. Don't do the side activities. Just play the story, and you're going to have a great experience. That's probably the most essential and probably best way to play this game. It is a bummer that there is all this other stuff, and it's kind of lame and not all that interesting, but just ignore it, and it's fine. You won't even really notice it. It doesn't like jam it in your face. Occasionally, yeah, you'll have to collect resources for the main story, but it's not like every single main quest story is collecting resources. So in the end, just do the story, just do the main quests, and you'll really enjoy this game. Like I said, this game has lots of flaws. It certainly doesn't ruin this experience. I don't hate this game. I did complain about a lot of things, but it doesn't mean I hate it. Like I said, I love the Dragon Ball story. I love the gameplay. I love the combat and the fighting, and the visuals were really awesome when they looked really cool. Those wow moments were very wow, and they looked great. So all in all, I had a really positive experience with Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. And I think you can too if you just kind of push aside all that other stuff and just enjoy the main story itself. So would I recommend Dragon Ball Z Kakarot? Absolutely. If you love Dragon Ball, go pick this up right now. You're going to enjoy it so much. It's just the same charm and awesome action that you love about Dragon Ball. And if you've never done anything Dragon Ball before, this might be a great place for you to start. It's a fun game that is kind of long, but it's a long story to cover. I mean, there's like 26 volumes of manga. I mean, look at this thing. It's huge. There's so much manga going on. So this game is massive. There's a lot going on in this story. It's got a lot to cover. It's a really lengthy experience, but it's a great experience for those who haven't done anything Dragon Ball before. I'd absolutely recommend checking out Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. If you've never done anything Dragon Ball before, this is a great place to start. But if you're coming into this game looking for like the best brand new RPG, it's going to be the best RPG experience with leveling up and XP and skill trees and all this stuff you love about RPGs, you're probably not going to like this game that much because it's just not a hardcore RPG experience. Like I said, it's just the RPG elements seem more like character building and progression, not so much player progression and building, which I didn't mind. I didn't mind it at all because I thought of it as a story building thing and a character progression thing, not so much as a gameplay factor. So yeah, absolutely, I would highly recommend you check out Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. Hey, thank you so much for watching my review for Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. I actually really liked this game, and I hope you liked it as much as I did. Let me know what you thought about the game. Let me know in the comments down below what your favorite parts were, or what your favorite character is, your favorite moment, your favorite fight, favorite matchup, favorite saga. There's so much we could talk about Dragon Ball, so hit me up in the comments. Let me know what your favorite Dragon Ball things is. That'd be awesome. I'd love to hear from you guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to hit like, subscribe, and the bell to get notified every time I post a new video, that would be awesome. Thank you guys so much for all the support. I really do appreciate it, and we will catch you guys next time on A Game for Your Thoughts.